Princess Anne just did the one thing Diana begged her to do before she died. In her final days, Diana grabbed Anne's hand and said 3 words she never forgot. "Please save him." Then she poured out secrets about Harry she had been carrying alone for years. Confessions so heavy that Anne held on to them for a long time before she could bring herself to let them go. And buried inside all of it was one shocking warning about William that Diana never wanted Harry to hear from anyone else. That moment has finally come. Diana's last words about Harry are now out in the open, and when Harry heard what his mother had said about him from beyond the grave, he broke down completely. The confession. Diana took to her grave. Harry almost did not pick up the phone that day. He was sitting inside his California home, completely surrounded by headlines screaming about his marriage, his exit from the royal family, and every single choice he had ever made that the British press had spent years tearing apart. Then he heard Anne's voice and something shifted deep inside his chest before she had even said a full sentence. "Harry, we need to talk," Anne said. "I have been holding something for you for a very long time. You will need to be strong for this. Can I count on that?" Harry's heart hammered so hard he could feel it in his throat. He managed to say yes. What Anne said next hit him like a punch to the chest. The first thing Diana wanted Harry to know was how sorry she was for using him as her emotional dumping ground. In her own words, after Diana's divorce from Charles, she was completely alone inside Kensington Palace. The institution had turned its back on her and walked away. Every single day inside that enormous building felt darker and heavier than the one before it. And in the middle of all of that, Diana had reached for Harry. She let him sit beside her in the evenings when she could not hold herself together. She let him climb into her lap when the crying came. Harry was barely old enough to understand what divorce even meant, and yet Diana had made him her emotional anchor because she had absolutely no one else left. She went to her grave believing she had damaged him beyond repair because of it. She rehearsed her apology 1,000 times. She wanted to sit across from him, take his hands, look him in the eye, and say that was never your burden to carry. But she never found the right moment. Then the tunnel in Paris happened, and there were no moments left. As Anne spoke, Harry remembered every one of those evenings. He remembered Diana pulling him fiercely against her and sobbing into his hair. He had never once resented a single second of any of it. He would have told Diana that immediately if she were alive, but she died believing she had broken her own child, and that knowledge tore through Harry like a blade. Then Anne told Harry what Diana had said about William. Diana had watched her boys fight their entire childhood in savage fights that shook the walls. One argument over a baseball exploded so violently that Diana sprinted downstairs and called the palace guards because she physically could not pull them apart. That fight left William with a broken, bleeding lip. But no matter how brutal the fighting got, William always came back first. He was always the one who walked back and said, "I am sorry, Harry. We are brothers. We should not fight like this." But Diana was terrified that one day William might run out of the strength to keep coming back first. And if that day ever came, Harry would never go first himself. The silence between them would grow into something so enormous and so cold that neither of them could ever find their way back across it. Then Anne described one specific night, and Harry went completely still. Harry had been very young when a fever tore through his small body. When the doctor arrived and began treating Harry, William climbed directly into the bed, wrapped his arms tightly around his little brother, and held him through every single procedure. The doctor worked on Harry's trembling body while William pressed his face against his little brother's ear and said in a fierce, low voice, "Stay with me. Just stay with me." William never moved an inch and held Harry through the entire night without closing his eyes once. Diana stood in that doorway and understood exactly what her 2 boys were to each other underneath everything the world would eventually do to them. Then Anne delivered the line that stopped Harry cold. William would come back first, even after everything, but Harry had to still be reachable when he did. Harry had barely steadied himself when Anne's voice came through the line again. There was something else, she said, something Diana had told her about Charles, and it was far more disturbing than anything Harry had just heard. The prophecy she left him and why Anne chose now. That last summer at Balmoral, Diana pulled Anne aside and said something that sounded like a woman who had already been chewed up and spat out by this institution and was pressing a final warning into someone's hands before it was too late. She told Anne that Harry was not built for this family. He felt everything too deeply to survive inside a machine that demanded you feel nothing at all. His heart stayed wide open, regardless of the cost. And inside this institution, an open heart was not a strength. It was a target. The palace would spend his entire life trying to grind that out of him. And it would never work, because Harry was not built to be managed. He was built to feel everything loudly and without apology. But Diana also warned Anne about something darker. She said that when someone hurt Harry, he did not go home quietly and heal in private. He became impulsive and reckless, and he destroyed things that should have been handled with far more care and patience. Then Diana said the thing that made Anne's blood run cold. She told Anne that Harry would one day fall completely in love with a woman who gave love freely and without conditions. And the moment that happened, this family would declare that woman a threat and pick her apart publicly before she had done a single thing wrong. Diana grabbed Anne's arm before she finished speaking. "I only hope he does it for a woman who truly loves his heart," she said. Because Harry in love is Harry with absolutely no breaks. And Anne had watched it all happen exactly the way Diana said it would. She watched Harry drag himself through a humiliating visa battle in a UK courtroom while the British press celebrated every detail of his defeat. She watched his application for permanent residency in America get seized by the national press and torn to pieces publicly. She watched his HRH title get quietly scraped off official palace documents without a single phone call. Anne watched Harry sit across from Oprah Winfrey and accuse his own family of racism in front of 50 million people. Harry did not just burn the bridge. He stood directly on top of it while it was fully on fire and kept pouring fuel onto the flames. But before Anne could give Harry the very last thing Diana had left for him, she needed him to go back to who he actually was to his mother before the world got its claws into him. The boy she knew and the morning nobody talks about. When Harry was 13 years old, he pulled Diana aside one evening and asked her something that stopped her cold. He asked her whether she believed the royal family actually loved her. Diana looked at her 13-year-old son and felt the air leave her body. She was not looking at her child. She was looking at herself. No child should be able to see that clearly that young. But Harry had been seeing things clearly for years, because Diana had made sure of it. Diana had been taking Harry, specifically Harry and not William, to hospices, AIDS wards, and homeless shelters for years. There were no cameras and no announcements. Just the two of them walking through doors the rest of the world preferred to keep shut. The very first time, Harry froze completely in the doorway of the hospice ward. The smell hit him before anything else, and his legs refused to carry him any further. The room stretched out in front of him, lined with beds, and the people in those beds had the look of those the world had already decided were finished. Diana stood directly beside him and said nothing. She did not drag him forward. She just waited until he was ready. Halfway down the ward, a 4-year-old girl that had LDS was sitting up in her bed. She looked up at Harry with enormous dark eyes and said nothing at all. She was just studying him the way children study something they are not entirely sure is real. Diana placed Harry's hand gently onto the little girl's shoulder, and his whole body went rigid. Diana leaned close to his ear and said quietly, "She needs every piece of love we can give her. It is okay to touch her. She will not break, and neither will you." On the drive home, Diana told him, "Those are the people the world decided to forget. We will not forget them." Harry carried those words inside him every single day for the rest of his life. Every single week without fail, Diana wrote Harry a handwritten letter, folded it carefully, and tucked it into his school bag. Nobody else knew it was happening. Then Anne confirmed something that had never been made public, and it landed like a slap. William did not receive those letters with the same regularity. Diana loved both her boys fiercely and equally, but Harry was the one who kept her awake at night. She believed with everything in her that she was the one thing standing between Harry and the version of himself that would one day go too far. After Diana died, the letters stopped. One week they were folded carefully in his bag, and the following week there was nothing, and there was never going to be anything again. Harry has kept every single one and has never shown them to a single person alive. Now here is the part nobody has ever fully told. The morning Diana died, the staff at Balmoral knew before either boy was woken. The news tore through the castle in the very early hours, and staff pressed themselves flat against corridor walls, crying without making a sound so the boys would not hear. Harry woke on his own in those early hours, opened his bedroom door, and stepped into a dark and mostly silent corridor. At the far end, a member of staff stood with their back flat against the wall, completely falling apart in silence. The staff member looked up, saw a 12-year-old boy standing there with wide, frightened eyes, and said in a voice being held together by pure force of will, "Go back to bed. Everything is fine. Go back to bed." Harry went back to bed and stared at the ceiling. His body already knew before his mind had any words to hold it. Something had happened to his mother. He lay there completely alone for 2 full hours, holding it entirely by himself in the dark. When Charles finally opened the door at 7 in the morning with his face pulled into the expression of a man about to say something that could never be taken back, Harry already knew exactly what was coming. His mother was gone and she was never coming back. But she had left one last warning behind, and Anne was about to reveal it to him. She never got to say. Diana had spent her entire adult life fighting a war inside the place that was supposed to be her home. The choice between being a full human being and a perfectly compliant royal had torn her apart from the inside. She chose herself. She chose love and honesty and the raw truth of who she was. And the institution made her bleed savagely for every single one of those choices in ways that never fully stopped. Diana could see the exact same fire raging inside Harry. She wanted him to fight his war. And when he stood up and chose what he wanted over protocol, the way she had, she wanted him to know with absolute certainty that his mother had made that same choice and would make it again without 1 second of hesitation. But then Diana said something that darkened everything beside it. She told Anne she hoped Harry would fight with enough control not to destroy what could never be rebuilt. And what she was most terrified of Harry losing was not a royal title. It was William. She was petrified that Harry would lose William permanently, the way 2 people who have publicly destroyed each other eventually reach a point where the road back simply disappears. Harry's voice was barely recognizable when he finally spoke. "I could have used this years ago. There were years when one sentence of this would have changed everything." "I know," Anne said, "and I'm sorry for every single one of those years." Diana had spent her final summer at Balmoral terrified that this institution would one day force her 2 boys to become strangers. She was not wrong. It did exactly that. And Charles, who had the power to reach across that growing silence at any point across nearly 3 decades, watched it happen and did absolutely nothing. Before Diana ended that conversation at Balmoral, she looked directly at Anne and said, "William will survive this family. He was built for it, but Harry needs someone who will not let them crush him completely. I need that person to be you." Anne promised she would be that person, and when it mattered most, with everything already shattered and Harry somehow still standing, she kept her word. Somewhere in California, Harry sat with the full, crushing weight of everything his mother had seen in him and silently carried for him across 29 years. Diana had known his fire and his fault lines and his enormous, bleeding heart, and she had loved every single piece of it without condition. She made certain that even from 29 years away, her words would find him at the exact moment she had always designed them to. That was a mother who refused, even in death, to ever let go.